Standard cost values, first of all, what are they?
It's a means of valuing your livestock at the end of the year. So there's obviously 5 different values that you can use during the year, or methods, and this is the first one that the government released the values on. So they've come out in January.
So changes, or what do we learn from it?
Basically, they're saying that the costs of growing the animals from sort of baby animals to mature and onwards are about the same as what they were last year. There's sort of a 1 to 7% change, except for your rise in 2 dairy heifers. They've said the cost of those have gone up by 50%. Which was a bit of a surprise. It's the only one that's really stood out.
That's a big chunk.
Yeah, so they've obviously taken the cost of all the hay and baleage and
because of the drought and because of
and I think that's feeding through to it now. So that's the one that's really stood out. But everything else is pretty much almost similar to last year.
How do we use that for our tax?
Basically, when you go in and see your accountant, you give them a bit of an idea of what you're doing for the next 2 or 3 years, and they'll look at whether this is the best scheme for you or whether one of the others. And there's a lot of factors to be taken into it. So there's not exactly, you should use this. There's no answer like that. It's a combination of factors.
And you basically interview them and say, well, please
the first thing you've got to find is what your plans are. You've got to tell your accountant what you're going to do in the next 2 or 3 years, because they've got to then consider the implications of moving from one scheme to another and whether you can even do it. So the more you can tell them, the better.
Brings us really to the payout and the options, and they're getting fewer and fewer.
Yeah, it's pretty grim with the latest release on what they're going to do to it. The reality for most farmers now is that they get out of bed, they're losing money. They're actually better to stay in bed because it's not costing them money. It's very, very grim.
I get to see the headlines, farmers told to stay in bed.
Well, yeah, it's actually cheaper because the moment you get up, you're starting to use your power, your fuel, all those sort of things. So yeah, better to stay in bed and not do anything. You're not losing as much.
Would the value of the stock, is that likely to come down because of people bailing out? Because they are bailing out.
Yeah, it will. Down south, we've got a bank that's actually taking a lot of action against farmers and telling them they've got to sell at the end of the season because they're pulling the funding. And
so that's happening?
Yep, that's happening out there right now. And talking to a couple of people down that way, they're predicting a sort of in-calf heifer buy, if this happens, be worth $250 to $400.
I'm speechless.
And that's a big drop from the money they've paid in the last 18 months, 2 years, because there'll be just such a glut of them. We know of at least 35 farms that have been told, and they're all carrying sort of 500 to 1,000 cows. So
there's going to be some very cheap but well-bred cows on the market.
Yeah, there is, and the guys that are going to sell up are going to be left with a huge debt, and their only prospect is bankruptcy, because they're not going to be able to afford to pay it, because they're going to be heavily in debt to the bank. The bank are going to want their money.
Kerry, this is very heavy stuff.
Yeah, this bank that started it, and the others haven't come on board yet. We know of one bank that's actually trying to help farmers out by giving them funding and getting the swap over where possible. But this one, they've taken control of farms where they're saying, right, we want to know what bills you've got, and we'll decide who you pay and not pay.
So they're taking over literally the accounting side?
Yeah,
so all the money goes into...
Yep, the money goes in the account, and then they freeze that money, and the dairy farmer then has to go and talk to the bank manager about what they can do with the money and whether they're allowed to spend it. They've even gone as far as to say, right, you've got this model tractor, we think that's overkill for what you do, sell it and get a lower model.
So the banks are running the farms?
Yep, they are. They've effectively taken over. In one case, we know there's a husband and wife that are on a farm. She had a baby a month ago, and the managers rang up and said, when is she going to get a job? We want her to get a job to help fund the farm because it's not making money and we're not prepared to carry the debt.
And she had a baby a month ago?
Yeah, a month ago. And when the farmer said that, and he said, well, you'll be able to find someone to look after the baby. We need her to get a full-time job because she needs a wage for you to stay on that farm.
Well, I mean, to get a nanny is going to cost probably what she's going to go out and earn.
Exactly, yeah. Yep. But that's the attitude they're taking. They've come down very, very hard.
Now, you're talking one bank, and no, we don't need to know who it is, but other banks are likely to follow.
If one's taking this, it's only going to be a matter of time. We know at least one is not going to do it. They're hanging in there. They are real focused and they are wanting to help these guys out.
Kerry, what options do the banks have apart from that? Because if I've got a debt or whatever it is and I can't service it, I mean, it's ticking time bomb.
Yeah, I don't know why they're doing it. Obviously, someone in the head office has hit a switch. And a lot of the managers that are making these calls have never even been near a farm. I know of 2 managers, they're 25-year-olds, not long out of university. They've been educated in Auckland, moved down to the Southland and told, right, go and deal with all these dairy farmers.
So some of the bank managers are sitting around the table And redoing budgets.
Yep, they're looking at the budgets. They've wiped the value of herds down, so equity's disappeared overnight. They've just made an arbitrary decision, right, we think the herd was, might have say 400,000 or 500,000, we think it's worth 200 now. So your equity's just disappeared. So you're right on the borderline in terms of their loan limits now, and they just won't extend the funding.
So how does the bank survive when that debt isn't paid and they go bankrupt?
They're just hopeful that they're going to recover their money one way or another. I don't think it's a smart move on their part. It just makes it worse than what it is. But they've obviously felt like they've got an overexposure somewhere along the line.
Yeah. So somebody sitting around a board table has said we're overexposed, fix it.
And they've hit the southern area. Like in Canterbury, there's hardly a word of it. But down south, they've gone.
And what about the Waikato and?
Yeah, it's all just ticking along. The banks are trying to support them. They've just picked on this one region for some reason. I don't know why.
No, and they want to know why themselves in Southland, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, the dairy farmers are just beside themselves. They've lost control.
Is it dairy farmers or is it
dairy farmers and share milkers both? Yeah, both of them. Yeah, they just gone heavy-handed.
As I said, I've just gone sort of cold, really, because that's going to be a lot of families and a lot of people who have got a lot of debt that they've got to pay off on wages.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they've been, for example, they've been telling them to fire staff and do it all yourself. Well, sometimes you need the staff because you can't do it on your own. But they don't care. And I've talked to a debt collector yesterday down that way, and he said that he's 2 or 3 occasions he's seen, when he's been to a farm, he's seen other people come in and they've just picked up the vehicles and driven them away because they don't want to take the risk with the bank and left the poor farm with nothing. It's very grim.
So this is going right back to the mid-80s or early 80s when we had that drought and the same thing was happening.
Yeah, way back, sort of repeating itself.
Kerry, that's really, really sad, but we'll keep monitoring it if we may.
Yes.
And I know that you and other chartered accountants are one of the first stops that people should make, and they should talk to you and then take you in to talk to the bank manager. Kerry, thank you very much indeed.